not one to believe in ghosts, and there are a lot of other people who are just as skeptical as I am. But I've had a few occasions that make me wonder. I'll share one of my stories, and I would love to know what you think about it, and if you have any answers. I have a close family member who says that she can see the dead. She describes it as visions, where she would see deceased people roaming around. Believing you have a gift like that kind of freaks me out. I don't know what my mom was thinking, but for some reason, she asked her one day if she saw anything in the house. I really wish she had said nothing, but she answered, though she wasn't clear about what it was. Fast forward about 2 months. My dad wakes up at 5 in the morning every day for work, and at 6 in the morning he wakes us up for school. On this specific morning, it wasn't him that woke us up. Police lights filled the air, followed by loud talking. Walking out of my room and down the hallway, I called for my dad. He answered and told me to come into the living room. I found him standing with 2 police officers that were writing down things that my dad said. Scared, I asked him what's going on. After the police officers left, he explained to me the most bizarre story. He woke up to find all the lights in the house were turned on, as well as a TV in the living room. His first thought was that I had woken up early and done it myself, but when he got to my room, I was asleep. Our entrance to the house is a door with a fence in the front of it that needs a special key to be opened. When he got to the living room, the front door was wide open, but the fence was still shut. You cannot open the front door from the outside without unlocking the fence. The weirdest thing of all was that there was a pot of boiling water on the stove. I don't even know how to use that stove, so it couldn't have been me. My dad and mom swear that it wasn't them. There was no sign that anyone has entered the house. All of the windows were locked from the inside, and we only had that one door. To this day, we still don't understand the situation. I'm still freaked out about it. It was 2017, the night of Independence Day. I was in college drinking with my boyfriend and a small group of friends. One of these friends is the caretaker of an old hotel building located on our university's campus. It only gets shown on tours. It's also thought to be haunted, probably another reason why nobody stays in there anymore. However, after the bars closed, the group decided it'd be a good place to finish out our night. Shortly after 2 a.m., the 6 of us arrived and started to give a brief tour. I set my phone and charger down in the kitchen. My boyfriend and I used the bathroom while everybody continued upstairs. I decided to pull back the shower curtain, for whatever reason, and saw that there was an entire wardrobe left behind. Dirty tennis shoes and a shirt were stacked in a small pile. If somebody was here, why did they leave all their clothes in the shower? Not thinking much of it, we went upstairs to catch up with the group, but we still were by ourselves at this point. There were 3 bathrooms, all with their doors open, and none of the lights were working. It no doubt felt spooky. Seeing these bathrooms look so vacant and unused, it was eerie, but none of these rooms felt too ominous or sinister. We walked into the primary bedroom, which was the last bedroom of the hallway. It was by far the biggest room, and it even had its own large bathroom inside. The light switches in this room worked, both in the bedroom and the bathroom. After a few minutes snooping, we joined everybody else on the roof. About 30 minutes passed. Our friend called up to us and let us know that he was here. So me and my boyfriend excused ourselves to let him in, the same door that we both came through. On the way down from the roof, we noticed something odd in the corner of this dusty, abandoned attic. From afar, it looked like different smoking pieces, bongs and pipes. Probably some pranksters or stoners looking for an exciting place to smoke. Upon closer inspection, though, we realized it was actually at least 10 different lawn ornaments and some other pieces, all facing a battered children's doll. This was the only stuff in the entire attic, not covered in dust. It didn't look right. We were a little on edge, but we continued downstairs. We passed by the bedrooms, noticing that the large main bedroom we were just in was now closed, and its door was locked. We were both sure that we left it open. Confused and even more on edge, we continued downstairs to let our other friend in. After our group rejoined in the attic, we decided to head down to the basement for some drinking games. On our way down, my friend was explaining some of the ghost lore of the residence. He said that this place was always closed and locked, because there was always so many complaints about weird things happening inside, as if somehow I already knew. He brought us to the primary bedroom door, still closed and locked. My boyfriend and I quickly went into the story of how we were just in there, but my friend thought we were joking. As caretaker, one of his jobs was to ensure that doors remained locked. The rest of the night passed without anything weird happening. We played flip cup and beer pong in the basement for a long time. Although creepy looking, the basement was not any more scarier than any other basement out there. 3 a.m. rolled around, and I was ready to leave. My boyfriend has always wanted to sneak out of parties, on the down low. He's weird about goodbyes, and thought if we announced our departure, his friends may try to keep him here. So we quickly made our way upstairs to the main floor. My boyfriend was leading the way. When we got to the top, he turned around and looked straight ahead at the original guest bathroom. He looked horrified, one hand over his mouth in shock, the other pointing directly at the bathroom. His eyes were staring at it, looking down through its open door. To this day, I don't know what he was staring at. It was also too dark to make anything out. I clearly thought this was a joke, and it's not out of the ordinary for him to be trying to spook me, especially at a haunted house. And the night wasn't going to have anything paranormal happening to us. I tried talking to him, but he didn't move, didn't reply, and wasn't even blinking. He just stared with his eyes wide. Feeling a bit emboldened, I walked up to the bathroom, turned on the light, and inspected. There wasn't one thing out of the ordinary that I could tell. Even those clothes were still piled up on the shower floor. I walked back out and told him that he could stop now. Of course he didn't, so I stopped talking to him and hoped that he would grow tired of his shenanigans. I began packing my things, making sure I had all of my stuff. I realized my phone charger was in the next room over in the kitchen, so I went over to grab them. I answered a few texts in the kitchen before walking back. My boyfriend hadn't moved an inch when I returned. At this point, I began to get a little worried. Part of me still suspected he's playing games, and he was about to yell boo and start laughing, but he hadn't moved from his rigid position, staring intensely at this bathroom for about 5 minutes straight. I slowly walked up to him and noticed he was crying. Tears silently flowed down his face. I have known this man forever, 3 years, and I can count on my hand the amount of times that I've seen him cry. I began to freak out. I yelled his name, but he didn't even move. I gently grabbed his face to move him back. He regained his balance and went right back to his original position, facing the bathroom, still covering his mouth, shaking with a tear striking down his face. So I pushed him more aggressively, and I broke his eye contact with the bathroom. Finally, his trance ended. He wiped a tear from his face and looked at me like I was crazy. He even had the audacity to ask me if I poured beer on his face. We argued for the entire walk back to my apartment because he seriously did not believe my story. He still thinks I'm making this all up and it's just a joke to scare him. His story on how we left the house was that we walked up the stairs and he sat down and waited for me to pack all my things. Except I know the fact that he was standing there the entire time. There were also no chairs around. He said that it only took a few minutes, and that he stood right back up and supposedly pushed in the chair and followed me out the door. He says when he got up from the chair, that's when he noticed me looking at him, like he was insane. And this was the first clue that something was wrong. He said he even remembers a person being in the room with us, watching me pack. He said he couldn't make out who it was, but that he thought it was a friend of ours from downstairs. No one from the party downstairs came up with us at this time. This part scared me to the core. After a full 24 hours, he still would not admit that he's playing a joke on me, or did any of the things that I described. He actually gets pretty upset when I bring it up, and does not want to talk about it. How can this be possible? Was this some sort of a mild possession? I cannot get this image out of my head. It was just horrifying. His wide eyes and tears running down his face. I work as an operator as a night shift manager at an incineration plant for chemical waste. 2 years ago, I changed companies because at my previous job, there was just an incident in which my crew and I nearly died. The management pretty much said, "You nearly died, So let's try to avoid it in the future. They didn't come up with some new safety concept. They were assholes, to tell you the truth. Back to the story though. I changed my workplace and now I operate on an incineration plant again. But this one is much smaller. It's pretty cool here. The plant is part of an industrial complex in the forest. And around the plant, there is only woods, except for one of the production departments, which is our direct neighbor. A few months into the job, some of our coworkers told me that sometimes weird things happen in our department. They said that sometimes you can hear footsteps near you or see a shadow figure around the corner. Sounds interesting, right? Well, they had a pretty good logical explanation for this. We not only use the incineration plant for chemical waste in the form of liquids like that of our other departments produce, and the fumes that this line produces are transported via underground pipes through our basement into the plant to be incinerated. These fumes are not super dangerous, but at high concentrations they can cause hallucinations. However, the pipes are pretty old, around 50 years, and they have definitely seen better days. Due to the economy in recent years, management decided to pause repair projects, including old leaking pipes like the ones in our basement. So if the AC shut off for a longer period inside the basement, these fumes would probably concentrate, and when you work there, you might experience hallucinations. That said, most of the weird stuff is probably caused by this. But let's get to my experience. 1 month ago, I had a night shift and my coworker for the night was sick, so I was alone 99% of that shift. So I didn't think about anything about being alone, even though it was my first time alone at this company. I was actually happy because I planned to watch a movie. During my first inspection tour, nothing unusual happened, until I had to get some data from the basement. I went downstairs and walked to the sensors to collect the data. Suddenly I heard a creaking sound behind me, and footsteps walking down the middle stairs. I turned around but didn't see anything, but I was curious. Why? Well, the stairs are sturdy as hell. One of my coworkers is rather large, and when he walks down these stairs, they don't make any sound at all, no noise, that I just heard. So whatever made that sound needed to weigh at least 400 pounds. I concluded that this must be a hallucination caused by the fumes. So I decided to continue my tour and turn on the AC. During this tour, I also saw a shadow figure around the corner, but I still thought, nah, it's just the fumes. As I returned to the control room, I turned on the AC in the basement to clear any fumes. 4 hours later, I made my second and final inspection tour. Like before, everything was normal until I reached the basement. I still shake a bit when I remember this. I walked down again. Remember, the AC was on and there was no fumes. As I descended, I heard footsteps again, directly behind me. I turned around. There was nothing there to see, so I continued to the sensors. Then I heard footsteps again, this time not walking, but running. I turned around real quick, and I saw a shadow just in time as it disappeared around the corner. I was shaking. I went very quickly and collected all the data because I wanted to go back upstairs and leave the basement alone for the night. As I walked upstairs again, I heard those charging footsteps again, this time in 2 different directions, one from behind me and one from above me. I was so scared, I charged up the stairs as fast as I could. As I reached the top of the stairs, I slightly turned around and saw a massive shadow in the hallway. I ran back to the control room and shut the door. Then I remembered. I had the AC turned on. That meant there shouldn't have been any fume concentration high enough to cause any kind of hallucinations. I was shaking for real this time. I stood up and I pondered whether I should go check the AC downstairs or just wait it out. As I stood by the door to leave the control room, I heard the footsteps behind the door. They were definitely footsteps. I made the decision not to be a hero and just wait for the next shift. Later, the next shift arrived and I told them all about my night. They laughed it off and said that the AC was probably acting up. I laughed and I agreed, even though I completely did not agree with the idea that the AC was broken. The next 2 days I had the weekend off, so I forgot about it. Then on Monday I arrived for my early shift, and I chatted a bit with the guys from the night shift. My quote-unquote experience came up again, and I laughed it off like I did the few days earlier, but my coworkers didn't. I asked them why. Well, as it turns out, the AC was completely fine. But what really made my experience scary was something else. Our neighboring department, which produces these fumes, wasn't even running due to the lack of customers this year. They didn't even have all the lines active. And during my night shift, they had every production line turned off. That means they couldn't have been producing these fumes, which also means whatever I saw was not hallucination caused by fumes, but it was something else. Whatever I saw and heard in that basement was real. Not hallucinations like many I had experienced before. I had experienced something that scared everybody there. My long-distance girlfriend visited me in Austin, Texas over the weekend, in July. It was one of her last visits before I moved to LA to be with her. Nearing the end of her visit, we decided to go see a movie, The Conjuring, which had just come out. We made it back to my place after going to a late-night showing, and eventually went to bed. The next morning, my girlfriend told me that she woke up in the middle of the night feeling uneasy. She rolled over to look at the clock, and sure enough, it said 3:17 a.m. This was the exact time in the movie that the paranormal activity in the house would begin. I thought it was a strange coincidence, but I really didn't give it much thought beyond that. We spent the rest of the day together, went to dinner, and hung out at my place. My girlfriend's flight left the following morning, so we stayed up late to make the most of our night together. However, I couldn't take any more days off of work, so I had to go in that morning. I woke up at 4:15 and got ready as quietly as I could, and headed out. Around 6 a.m. I got a call from my girlfriend, which I thought was incredibly weird. Why was she up? And more importantly, why is she calling me? Hello? Hey, she said. So something happened. She assured me that everything was okay, but she was freaked out and didn't want to talk about what had happened over the phone. I insisted her to tell me, but she was adamant that she couldn't talk about it, and it would just have to wait until I got home. I was dumbfounded, weirded out, and generally confused and concerned. I couldn't begin to guess what had happened. I left work about an hour early to get back to my apartment sooner. I found my girlfriend in the living room, camped out on the couch. So what happened? I asked. She began to relay the story. She said that she was briefly woken up when I was leaving, but settled back into sleep. Sometime later, though, she heard a voice. My voice. It apparently sounded like I was standing over her, trying to get her to wake up. Hey, the voice whispered. She grumbled and protested, as somebody who was desperately trying to sleep, and pulled the covers over her face. The voice said something else, but she couldn't decipher what it was. But again, she was totally under the impression that it was me. When she didn't respond, the covers were yanked off her face. She opened her eyes and saw no one. She sat straight up in bed and looked all around, but the room was empty. That's when she immediately went into the living room and turned on the TV and called me. Since she was alone in my apartment, she didn't want to talk about it until I was physically with her. Not only did I believe her story, but as someone who has been long interested in paranormal, I was never into the idea of experiencing it myself, let alone in my own apartment. All I could think about was the fact that she was flying back to LA in a few hours, which would leave me alone in a haunted apartment for the next 6 months. After we said our goodbyes, I headed back to my place as the sun started to set. I wondered what was awaiting for me back in my apartment. As it turns out, nothing. I'll admit, I slept with all the bathroom lights on for a couple weeks. Even though I was creeped out, nothing happened the whole time that I lived there. My girlfriend flew back in February and stayed the night without incident, and we loaded up the moving truck to head back out to LA the next day. There was one thing though. Way back when I first moved in, I was checking my mailbox. There was some junk mail in there, addressed to the previous tenant. Hard to explain, but as I held the mail and looked at the tenant's name, I got the strangest feeling of unease. Felt so drawn to the name, and just continued to stare at it. All I can really say is that I felt like something had happened to this person. I'm not a psychic or anything like that. What was this incident, and what happened to my girlfriend? I don't know. I'm 16, and I've been dealing with something terrifying for as long as I can remember. It started when I was 5, and honestly, I don't even remember how it started, even to this day. I know that some people won't believe me, but I need to share this. Maybe somebody out there has gone through the same thing. It all began when my mom, who was a single parent at that time, my stepdad was very nice, and eventually we moved into his house. My stepdad had a daughter who was 8 years older than me, and I shared a room with her, but she wasn't around much because she was already dating and out with friends. The house was very old. It was built in the early 1900s. And I remember feeling creeped out almost immediately. At first, it was just nightmares. I was scared of the dark, so I used to sleep in my stepsister's bed because it was closer to the hallway light. But every time I slept in her bed, I had this awful nightmare where something chased me, trying to hurt me. I was 5 and didn't really think much of it, so I just stopped sleeping in her bed. But then the nightmares started happening in my own bed. It wasn't every night, but it was often enough to scare me. I couldn't really explain it to anybody because honestly, who's gonna believe a little kid that they're haunted? Over time, things got weirder though. By the time I was 7, we redecorated the room, and I started noticing shadows moving at night. I would hear random old timely music. I would wake up in the middle of the night and see shadows standing in the corner or behind a door. One night I woke up, I was in my room, but felt like it was in my grandparents' old living room. It was completely empty, but even though I knew I was awake, I couldn't see my room at all until I bumped my head on the door. That's when I started to seriously freak out. But I didn't tell anybody because I figured they would just brush it off. By the time I was 9, I was convinced that it was the spirit of an old woman that used to live in the house. The only owner of the house before us was a 96-year-old woman who died in a retirement home, and I thought that her spirit might have stayed behind. I would see her shadow standing in the corner where my stepsister's bed used to be, or I would feel something pulling at my feet while I slept. Sometimes I would see her standing behind the door, just a silhouette through the glass. I never really saw her face, but I just knew it was her. It got to the point where I just got used to her presence. I wasn't comfortable with it, but it became a part of my life. That is until things got worse. Her presence started to feel more aggressive. She would move around more, and her shadow looked less human. It was taller, skinnier, and more threatening. Nightmares became more intense, and I could feel her in other areas of the house, not just my room. I would hear her footsteps on the stairs, like somebody was walking around at night. The whole house just felt off. This went on till I was about 10. That's when I told my aunt what I was going through. She convinced my mom to have a priest come and bless the house. After that, everything stopped. 2 years, there was no nightmares, no shadows, noises, nothing. It was a huge relief. Then, when I was 12, my dog passed away. Everything started up again. I'd see my dog lying on my parents' bed, even though he was gone. Sometimes I would hear something eating from his food bowl, even though our other dog was nowhere near it. Then when I was 14, I invited a friend over for a sleepover. She believed me when I told her about the haunting because she said she could see spirits. We decided to set up an experiment to see if we could catch anything on camera. We put cameras in the room, and the next morning we found something. There was a dark shadow lying between us in bed, completely still, like it was dead. The camera stopped recording at 3:30 a.m. But what we saw freaked us both out. I showed the video to my parents hoping that they would believe me now, but instead they just had me delete it. I wanted to send it to somebody that would know something about this stuff, but they wouldn't let me. After that, things went quiet again for a couple years. I thought that maybe it was all over, but 6 months ago everything started up again. This time, it's worse. I have been dealing with depression for the last year, and I guess somehow it's triggered it to come up again. The shadows are back, the noises, the feeling of being watched. The other night I heard my brother's voice calling my name at around 1:34 a.m. It said, "Come take a quick look," but it didn't sound right. It was his voice, but it was like a recording. Then it switched to my dad's voice, saying the exact same thing. I didn't respond, and I'm glad that I didn't. I know it feeds off of fear, and I know it's getting stronger. I don't know what this thing is or why it's attached to me, but I need some kind of answer.